Hello there, guys. How are you today, America? I am coming here to visit with you. Every freedom-loving American needs to hear this information I have today. My name is Tommy Collins. I'm the Executive Director for America Restored. And we're here in Washington, D.C., and I have Bill Biney over here with me. Bill is the former Technical Director of the NSA. And so basically, Bill, tell us a little bit about what you did originally in the government and what your qualifications are to give us this information that we have here today.
Well, for close to 40 years, I was I just was analyzing large amounts of data, mostly against the Soviet Union, but also the Warsaw Pact. So it was a very large data problem, and figuring out ways to be able to see into that data and figure out what it meant and what would constitute warning for this country and other countries. Yeah. Okay. And I worked on different things like data systems, solving those systems, solving code systems, cipher systems, things like that.
Okay, very good. And that work got you actually promoted to the actual technical director of the National Security Agency.
Well, it was the area that was intelligence reporting and analysis. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
That was for the whole world.
So for the whole world. Okay. Yeah. So we know that Bill is very qualified to analyze data. President Trump asked for you to have a meeting with one of his cabinet members on this, and could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, but there's a longer story here that your listeners need to know. First of all, gucifer, the original gucifer was a Romanian hacker who was picked up and arrested, and then after him, in July, when WikiLeaks was getting ready to publish a lot of the emails, all of a sudden Gucifer 2 appeared.
Okay.
Now the original Gucifer thought that this Gucifer 2 was a fabrication. And then Gucifer 2 started claiming that he hacked the DNC, and he had data from the DNC, and he was doing it for the Russians.
Okay.
So he then, later on, put this data out on the web as the data that he hacked from Russia, from the DNC. So he claimed that. So now we had some data to look at forensically and look and see exactly what we could tell from the data itself, what it meant and whether or not it was really a hack. And that's exactly what we did.
So let me clarify this. So basically what you're telling me here is the data that we have right here is the data for supposedly for the hack into the DNC that's being claimed by
Gucifer 2. Yeah.
Gucifer 2 and folks in our administration as well.
Right.
Right,
yep.
So who?
Like Comey claimed that this was an indication of the Russian involvement. So we started looking at this, and what this file here is simply every data file, the amount of bytes in the data, plus the timestamp at the end of the file. And it was file after file, timestamp after timestamp. So you could take between any two timestamps and calculate the number of bytes involved, or bits, and also then the rate of transfer of the data. With every file you could do that.
Okay.
So, and the highest rate of transfer we got from this was 49.1 megabytes per second. Now we knew that could not go across the network, but some of the people claimed that it could. So we tried it. So we said, okay, we had some people here put up a data set of about a gigabyte, and we had some friends in Europe that would try to test it to see how quickly they could pull it across. And they did it from various locations in the Netherlands, in Albania, and Belgrade, and also in the UK. And the fastest rate we got was from a data center in New Jersey and a data center to a data center in the UK, and that was 12 megabytes per second, which is less than a fourth of the rate necessary to transfer the data as it was listed from Gucifer 2.
Wow, it was less than a fourth of what they're claiming.
Yeah, and so that meant you couldn't, that just simply meant that this was an impossible transfer at that rate.
So what do you, so it couldn't have been, however,
it is a perfect download rate for a thumb drive.
Oh my. So basically the DNC hack and the rate matches up with an inside job.
Well, it was local. I mean, we can't say it was inside necessarily directly inside by people there, but It certainly was somebody local. It wasn't a long-distance hack.
Okay,
So, I mean, we can't prove who did it from this data.
Okay. You can't prove who did it from this data, but what you can prove is that this wasn't a hack from overseas from the Russians. Right. Okay. So we have Comey in our administration. Brennan, was he in on the claim of this?
Yep.
And others in our government claiming and labeling this data right here that Bill was able to obtain overseas or wherever.
On the web.
On the web.
Yeah.
He was able to obtain this data that our government is claiming it is data that was hacked by the Russians. But it gets even deeper than this, guys.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So go ahead and tell us then what you guys discovered with the 2 potential files on the different dates.
Then we were looking at the data, and Gucifer 2 put out 2 sets of data.
Okay.
One dated the 5th of July of 2016, the other dated the 1st of September of 2016. So we started looking a little closer at it since it was during the basically a same compacted amount of time. And if you looked at it and you ignored the hour and the date, but looked at minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, those 2 data sets merged just like that. So that meant that Gucifer 2 was manipulating the data. He was taking one file down, splitting it into 2 parts, issuing one for the 5th of July and one for the 1st of September. So he's fabricating. He's manipulating and changing the data, and so the whole thing is about Gucifer 2 is a fabrication.
But our government is claiming that the Russians hacked the DNC, and they're claiming that this data that we have in front of us right now, they're claiming that this particular data is the data that the Russians used to hack the systems. And then we see here from what you're telling us, Bill, that our intelligence people are using data to make a decision that is tampered with.
It's false.
It's been tampered with.
It's a fabrication.
It's a fabrication.
It's worse than that, though, because even if you looked at some of the people who are still looking at timestamps, and they're seeing the timestamping with the transactional information inside the data itself, and they're seeing that there's several different timestamps. One for the East Coast of the United States, one for Central Time, and one for the Pacific Time. But all that meant to me was it didn't change anything. It just simply said they're playing with the data and doing it in different areas. That's fine, but it's still not an overseas hack, and it's still a fabricated set of data. And that simply added to it.
So the Russian accusations that the DNC was hacked by the Russians and that our president was somehow helped by the Russians is clearly data that's been tampered with. It's false data. The files apparently, from what Bill is telling us, were split in 2 and then merged. When you merge them back together, you can see that those 2 dates, by the time frame, you can see the 2 dates actually are one file. So
Yep.
This is what they're making their claims off of, and it's false. So tell me a little bit more. You and I have talked about how this whole thing came to be, where these intelligence folks like Comey and Brennan and others made this determination. There was a group of folks that were all called together.
Well, originally, if you go back, the Intelligence Community Assessment report that was issued in January of 2017, that report was basically selected analysts from NSA, CIA, and FBI. So they were selected people, not the normal ones working the problem. And so they got a selective result, and that was that intelligence community assessment that they put out, which was not really an intelligence community assessment. That would be a national intelligence estimate. If you had all the community agencies coming together to say that this is what we all have and what we all have determined, then it becomes a national intelligence estimate, not an intelligence community. The intelligence community's got 16 or 17 different, if you count the DNI, I don't really count them, but so they say 17 agencies. Well,
17 agencies, what? Clarify to the viewers what the 17 agencies, what they say about that. I think some of them may know, but others may not.
Well, I mean,
They claimed.
well, the 3 agencies only claimed that this was highly likely. Now, it's even worse than that because only 2 claimed it to be highly likely. And they were the 2 that didn't matter. That was CIA and FBI. The one that did matter was NSA. And they said they had moderate confidence. Now,
But they go out and claim that 17 agencies
claim
across
17,
the board.
yeah.
So you guys heard on the news how 17 agencies collaborated that the DNC hack was actually committed by Russians, which was part of the narrative of this fake Russian collusion witch hunt against our president.
Yep. And because that was one of the first things that told me that this entire story was false, was the fact that NSA had moderate stuff, and they didn't come out and clearly say, this is what was hacked, it went here and it went there, and that place over there is where they did it from. Because if you recall, about 4 years ago, the Chinese hacked into some stuff here in the U.S., and then NSA came out and said, yes, they did it from that building in Shanghai. You can tell that by the IPs, and NSA has all these traceroute programs on the web inside the United States because they're watching us too, and also around the world. So if anybody's going to, and the choke points are the points of transfer to the transoceanic cables. So that's where all the foreign stuff comes in, all the stuff going to foreigners goes out, all the stuff transiting the U.S. from foreigner to foreigner, like from Europe to Japan.
Right.
That goes through the U.S. and they all come into those choke points of where the transoceanic cables surface, and NSA covers them like hound dog. So they know everything that goes across the net, and they should be able to come out. If this was truly a Russian hack, they should say it came from that building in that city in Russia.
So tell us about your meeting with then, would it be Pompeo at that time was?
He was director of CIA.
The director of CIA.
Yeah.
So apparently President Trump said, if you want to know what's going on with this stuff, he told Pompeo to go ahead and get a hold of Bill Biney. And guys, again, Bill is the former tech director of our National Security Agency. So you are having an expert that deals with this kind of data come to you and tell you we have forensic proof right here, forensic proof that this was not a Russian hack into the DNC, that it was done locally, either via a thumb drive, which the data points very positively towards the fact that it was potentially a thumb drive.
Yeah, or a local download.
And I want to say something right now, because if President Trump is going to be watching this, I would certainly hope that he's going to see this. And I would like to say, President Trump, if you really want to know what's going on, Bill is the one that, given access, will be able to track down the information. You and I were talking about, we don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but we were told there was a certain somebody that there's a report, and by somebody who would know that this report existed, that there was a report that the person who actually did that there's a report that was done, what, by the FBI, did we say?
FBI, yeah.
By the FBI. We were told there is a report. So if President Trump requests this report, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, it's a report that Seth Rich's computer actually had information going back and forth to WikiLeaks, and the FBI has that report, President Trump. I highly, highly recommend. And who am I? I'm a freedom-loving American that supports my president and supports my country. And I will do everything I can till my dying breath to see the restoration of this nation. And Bill has the ability, correct, given access, to be able to find the information we need to expose these bad actors in the deep state.
NSA actually would have all the data that was transferred to WikiLeaks from Seth Rich if he did it. So, and that's what the assertion is, and certainly they would have that data going across, again, those ports going the transoceanic cables. There is no reason why they wouldn't have that data.
So we can tell by the rate of transfer, we can tell that the report that is being used by Comey and Brennan and others that claimed that 17 agencies, or whoever claimed that 17 agencies collaborated that this was actual accurate data. That's a lie. And we have the forensic proof right here, and we will be getting this right into our president's hands prior to this broadcast being released, that this data right here, that Bill already met with then CIA Director Pompeo. He gave him the information that he has, but we're going to make sure this gets in our president's hands where he can see how these files were tampered with, the dates were changed, but the time frame merges them perfectly. And tell us about the mathematical chances of this, like we were talking.
Well, it's like 40 or 50 files that then merge from the September 1st data into the 5 July. And if you just said, well, what's the chance of any one matching a gap in the 5 July data?
Any one,
it's like probably 1 in 100, you know, going through the seconds and all over the time period. And then you could say, I mean, that would be a rough estimate. And then you could say, okay, well, then the probability of them both merging is like 1 chance in 100 to the 50th power.
and what does that mean to us non-mathematical?
Well, it's like
folks?
a 1 followed by 100 zeros. 1 chance in that number.
Wow. So there you go. So we have the proof. We can actually get this out to the press. We have the forensic data proving that the DNC was not hacked by Russia, and we're going to make sure that our president gets this in his hands. Bill,
Yep.
It's exciting.